Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jean-Marc Crevoisier, Head of Communication of GESDA. And the press conference will be in English, but if you have questions after that, you can ask them in French. Vous pouvez poser les questions en français, bien sûr. Il y a plein de gens qui parlent plusieurs langues. On pourrait même en italien, je pense. Donc, on est assez complet. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you here in this beautiful room at the campus, at the biotech campus. A few minutes or a few hours before the opening of our second Geneva Science and Diplomacy Summit. It's also a great pleasure to have in this room nearly all or a great majority of the members of the board. Some has a long journey behind them, others shorter, but all are very welcome to our annual meeting. We are looking forward to interesting, to inspiring debates and discussions. I'm sure that you, the journalist, the representative of the press, you will find here where the future is at stake, you will find here stories that provide relevant insights for your readers, for your viewers, or for your listeners. But let me now give the floor to our chairman, Mr. Peter Brabeck-Letmathe, who will share with you, on the past years, he will share his thoughts on the past years and on the future GESDA goals. Please, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. A warm welcome from my side to all of you. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. For us, of course, a very important meeting today. We have finished 3 years of startup phase, and we have started today the scale-up phase of GESDA. So 3 years ago, Switzerland and Geneva trusted us in development of an instrument of anticipation and action which should be in the service of humanity and that widens the circle of beneficiaries of advances in science and technology, and at the same time strengthen Geneva as a leading hub for multilateralism. That is basically the mission that we received 3 years ago. It began all with one question, and that was, how can advances in science and technology help? What can science diplomacy do? How can our community best serve the world? And we answered this by creating a bridge between science and diplomacy and politics. So GESDA serves as an honest, transparent broker, reflecting Switzerland's neutrality and Geneva's multilateralism. We work with 4 communities. We work with science, with policy, diplomacy, and civil society. The board of directors has observed today in its meeting the advancement that we have achieved over these 3 years. And we are now on our second breakthrough radar and our second summit. We have generated impressive global interest in a multilateral world that anticipates more value from innovation. I think you will see today we have more than 1,200 people participating in this second summit. And as a matter of fact, due to the limitation that we have in space, we have been saying more no to participants than yes. So I'm pleased to say that this is mainly due to the global participation that has nearly doubled over the last year. The radar produced in partnership with the Fondation pour Genève now involves 1,200 scientists from all over the world. And they are presenting about 40 scientific emerging trends which are likely to be operational in the next 5, 10, or 25 years. And included, as you will see in the document, are noteworthy topics like augmented and virtual reality, organoids, geoengineering, and digitalization of conflicts. New this year is that we have a GESDA's pipeline of solution ideas. So they are the first prototypes of possible actions to accelerate the use of emerging trends such as quantum computing, neurotechnology, decarbonization, and science and diplomacy. The pipeline and other initiatives lay the groundwork for open, accessible benefits from science for the biggest part of humankind. This year, we will propose, during our meeting, the creation of an open quantum institute to provide global access to the cutting edge of quantum computing technology, particularly for researchers who work on fulfilling the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. Our ambition is to widen the access to as many groups and regions as possible, and for the Open Quantum Institute to develop and host a repository of the Sustainable Development Goals use cases. The second major solution ideas that we are going to propose is the creation of a global science and diplomacy curriculum that will bring together people from Switzerland and around the world who are interested in anticipatory science and diplomacy to build the individual and institutional capacity needed to promote science and diplomacy as an effective tool of multilateralism. So we have two concrete solutions that we will present, but we have also another set of solutions which we will mention, and then we will see what the feedback is from the summit and whether we then work on them much more concretely. This year's summit also gives an important place to the young aspiring leaders who are invited to attend the event, and they are invited to share their thoughts during the sessions. Joining them in Geneva will be 3 finalists selected from a competition organized by the Youth and Anticipation Initiative, which was jointly implemented with the University of Cape Town's Vice-Chancellor, Professor Mamokgethi Phakeng, who is with us, and he will talk to you about it, and the GESDA board member. Additional students and young professionals have been nominated by our partners, which are the Villas Institute, Swissnex, and Young Academics. I think the world of today, which is characterized by geopolitical stresses, we have issues of food and energy issues, we have climate change. I think all of those is just another reason why GESDA is the right organization for our times. And using science diplomacy to shape how our governance can best serve the needs of humanity and the planet in the 21st century. We do not want to see key science and technology developed during this century only to monopolize 3 or 4 large private companies or 3 or 4 major powers, geopolitical powers. Science diplomacy is becoming a global movement. It is both a government practice and emerging academic discipline. It's developing rapidly with the acceleration of science and technology and their role in global governments. So if I take the situation the world confronts today, I think there's no time to be wasted. The world is filled with deepening challenges, divides and inequalities. It urgently needs our research, our passion, our caring, and most of all of our solutions. Let me introduce perhaps now the first product, which is our GESDA Science Breakthrough Radar 2022, which I'm sure you found, and if not, it's over there, you can see that. The first is to thank, first of all, those who have been leading this effort, which were our two co-chairs of the scientific forum, Joël Messon and Martin Wetterli. They are responsible to have assembled and contacted more than 4,000 scientists all over the world and got the signature for this document of more than 557. I will now introduce Michael Hengartner, our new board member and member of the advisory board to the GESDA Science Breakthrough Radar since July 2021, and who is going to comment this year's edition a little bit more in detail. So Michael, who is joining us, I see on the screen, warm welcome, and it's your turn.
Thank you, Peter. So the Science Breakthrough Radar is the instrument upon which GESDA's activities are directly or indirectly based. The reason that an instrument like the Breakthrough Radar is even possible is the realization that technological progress is, in most cases, a progressive process.
We have a problem, Michael, we have a problem. We don't hear you very well. I don't know whether it's your microphone or...
I can try to get closer.
Yes, perhaps. That might help.
Shouldn't move during talk.
Yeah, thank you very much.
How about now?
Yeah, much better.
Voila. Good. As I mentioned, technological progress is a progressive process. That means that if you understand a field well, and you understand past progress in this field, you can anticipate what the further progress in this field is likely to be in coming years. The goal of the Breakthrough Radar is to transform this process in a number of areas in which we believe that technological developments will have a particularly strong potential to affect us either at the personal level, at the societal level, or at the planetary level. Once the radar has identified these potential developments, it gives us the possibility to discuss ahead of time what these developments might mean for us and how we, as a society, perhaps even as a species, want to address both the opportunities and the challenges that these technological developments will bring with them. You will hear in a few minutes from my colleagues some first examples of such activity. Last year, we presented to you our first edition of the radar. This first edition described expected developments over the next 5, 10, and 25 years in 18 topics distributed over 4 areas: quantum and AI, human augmentation, eco-regeneration and engineering, and scientific diplomacy. This version 1.0 is an impressive field piece of work, but it's always the case with 1.0 versions that can be improved upon. Over the past year, we have worked hard to make improvements and make the radar even better, more robust, and more useful. So what is new this year? First, we have significantly enlarged our author base. 543 scientists had contributed last year to the radar. This year, we have 774 scientists involved, an increase of 43%. And I would like to join Peter in thanking Joël, Martin, and these 750 authors for their contribution to the radar. Second, we have expanded the number of topics that we follow from 18 to 28. We have also included this year a 5th area, which we call knowledge foundations, which includes topics such as the future of evolution, the future of education, fields that depend not only on technological developments, but also on developments in the social sciences and in humanities. In a similar vein, we have included 2 new analyses in our 2022 radar, which look at technological developments with, on the one hand, a philosophical, and on the other hand, a geopolitical lens. And finally, we introduced a new section that tries to map graphically both current discussion and social action within society with regards to these topics. The goal is to give the reader a feeling for how these topics are already on the radar of society, so to speak, and the breadth of the mood of society with regards to these topics, ranging from enthusiasm to skepticism to possibly even fear. Voila. With this, I close my comments, and I thank you for your attention. Back to you, Jean-Marc.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Hengartner. It is thanks to the radar that GESDA identifies science breakthrough. This year, we take it one step further and we propose 2 concrete ways of action that will be discussed during the summit, mainly tomorrow afternoon. Let's have a look at the first of them in a video presenting the Open Quantum Institute. If you are ready, we can go.
What do we mean when we talk about quantum?
The big news about quantum is that in the first time in millennia, we invent a new way of computing.
Quantum technology is something that's rapidly developing and it will have a big impact on the world.
Our work's very necessary if you're going to use quantum computing to actually work on real-life problems.
To be able to actually share what the quantum capability will allow in the future, we absolutely need to open it up.
There will be problems we can solve with quantum that will be totally intractable classically.
In 2050, 3/4 of the world's population will live in urban centres. So we're already trying to anticipate what's happening in the world, as we know, and how there'll be a need to adapt the way we live.
At this time, quantum computers will no longer be isolated to the lab. Governments, private companies, institutions of learning will all be harnessing this technology. We see this already having a huge impact on aeronautics and much more.
We'd very much appreciate if governments and particularly local authorities would look objectively to the future, to spare some time to look at innovation.
It is a geopolitical topic where many public and private actors are already investing.
There's a huge gap between people who know the theory of quantum computing and people with the application problem. And we started to bridge that.
Looking at quantum computing through a diplomatic lens, we see that there are gaps. Some players cannot afford to take part in the development or use of quantum computers. Also, the application in wider societal and environmental challenges has not been fully explored. We believe everyone should have the right to benefit from this science, and its potential should be harnessed to progress the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
One of the core ideas that came from the task force was an Open Quantum Institute, an inclusive, collaborative effort around developing the technology will ensure that the future of these technologies will benefit the entire human race and not just certain companies or countries.
With an Open Quantum Institute, or OQI, GESDA and its community propose to enable a space where quantum computing is made accessible and understandable to all.
Bringing these actors together to make a baseline for use cases around SDGs is going to be at the core of what the Open Quantum Institute will bring.
This is fundamental to our work, bringing science and diplomacy together to allow room for discourse and multilateral coordination. Brokering this conversation in the early stages of any new technology will allow everyone to have the tools that impact people, society, and the planet.
The Open Quantum Institute is well placed in Geneva and in Switzerland with different actors from the international governance world.
The The Open Quantum Institute will work with the global networks of partners who focus on universal challenges and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, who help define and prepare real-world use cases for quantum computing applications.
Quantum is a complex technology. It's something that when you just say quantum, a lot of people run away because like, I'm not a physicist, I don't know anything about quantum.
We need the best and brightest people on the planet to help us.
We are calling to technology providers and developers to express their interest in tackling the SDG use cases the OQI will be providing. We also need governments to actively help shape the multilateral relevance of the Open Quantum Institute. We want the OQI not to just be an idea on paper, but a real center where you can all come and benefit from it. This is a brand new approach, and we want you to join the discourse and share your ideas and help us test it. Together, we can use the future to build the present.
Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Mrs. Fabiola Gianotti. What are your reflections on the images we just have seen?
Thank you. Does it work? Yes. Thank you very much for having me on this conference press, on this panel. So I have a few thoughts that I would like to share with you, very much in line with the video. The first one, we all know that quantum is one of the technologies that have the largest potential transformative impact on society. It's not a new idea. Already Richard Feynman had mentioned the possibility of quantum, using quantum computers. However, the times have become ripe essentially recently, and you've seen a huge amount of investment resources, financial and human resources by private sector, public institutions into quantum. So clearly in 10-15 years from now, we hope to have a quantum computer that will allow us to solve problems that are intractable today, from health to food, climate change, etc. And as the video correctly said, the full potential and reach of this technology still needs to be complete and to be developed. Let me open a small parenthesis on a topic which is very close to my heart: fundamental research. Quantum mechanics was developed and understood at the beginning of last century, about a century ago. And at the beginning, when it was understood and developed how this microscopic world works, that knowledge was considered to be useless knowledge, with no practical application on real life, so far away from our dimension, the size of us, a human being. And yet, without quantum technology, these gadgets will not exist, and now we will not be here discussing quantum computing. So I close the parenthesis. So this is the first thing that I wanted to mention. The second one is that technological developments nowadays are unsustainable. What does this mean? That as the technology grows, and it grows fast, the gap between developed and developing countries, between those with and those without access to technology, widens. And we must revert this trend. And the way to go is to go open science, open technology, open education, so science, technology, educations available to everyone. So that is the framework where the Open Quantum Institute is seeing its birth. It is the mission of GESDA to anticipate. So we anticipate not only a new technology like quantum, but we also anticipate a new way of working together, more inclusively, and a way that allows us also to reduce the inequities across within and across countries. So the Open Quantum Institute will have essentially two main goals. One is to make quantum technologies available to everybody as a way of boosting the technology itself, because when you share information, of course, you boost among scientists and those that develop the technologies, you boost the developments, you accelerate them, but also as a way of making those technologies available to everyone, so reducing inequities. Second point, make sure that those technologies are used also to serve humanity and to help us address the challenges that humanity is facing, in particular those that are pretty well encapsulated in the Sustainable Development Goals. And Geneva is an ideal hub for this Open Quantum Institute because, as the chair said, Geneva is one of the leading hubs for multilateralism. But it's also Geneva and Switzerland are also the home of leading scientific research institutions like CERN and leading universities like University of Geneva, ETHZ, PFL. CERN is a partner in this endeavor because we believe that this is an excellent initiative. We have technical competence in quantum, of course. We work with the quantum world every day, at every moment in time. When we study the elementary particles. So we work on quantum computing, quantum network, quantum sensor, but also because the values of inclusiveness, openness, open science, and education available to all are very much enshrined in our DNA, and also collaboration across disciplines, across sectors, and across national borders. So we have quite a lot of experience in this, in how to implement these values. Another point, which in my opinion is very important, is also to prepare today's and tomorrow's workforce. We need to grow and to prepare the young people who will contribute to developing these technologies, and then in the future we'll also use and develop them and improve them. And so also in this respect, CERN can maybe help together with other very prestigious institutions. So I think I stop here, and of course I will be happy to answer questions later on. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fabiola Gianotti. We now move to the second GESDA proposal, the first global curriculum on science diplomacy, including our new Youth Anticipation Initiative. And these topics are also resumed in some moving images, and please, you can start broadcast the second film. Thank you.
This is a video about science and diplomacy and the need to bridge the gap between mindsets by developing a global curriculum to tackle future challenges together.
Most of the challenges we are facing today, they share three characteristics. We need science to understand them or technology to address them. They all cross national borders, and no country or sector can tackle them alone.
It's important that we bring the two worlds together so that those who give advice on science policy development understand how science might shape the future.
We need to train people who speak both languages, if I may say, speak both the natural science language, or at least understand it, and speak or understand the social science language.
The COVID-19 pandemic, the climate, food and energy crisis all highlight the increasingly important role of science on the international stage.
It symbolizes so well the spirit of collaboration for progress, a spirit that we've never been so much in need of championing, reaffirming and fighting for.
Building bridges between the scientific and diplomatic worlds has never been more urgent, but these communities remain educationally and professionally siloed.
What for us a few months ago was a dream has rapidly become reality. It's about using science to achieve diplomatic goals.
Future leaders will need innovative educational frameworks, training approaches and exchange platforms to better understand each other and work together. The GESDA Science Breakthrough Radar, launched in 2021, anticipates the scientific breakthroughs that will emerge over the next 25 years in fields such as artificial intelligence, neurotechnologies, or decarbonization.
Making the GESDA Science Breakthrough Radar available to the international community as a training tool, and by training the future ambassadors of science diplomacy.
A coalition of Geneva, Swiss and global institutions brought together and facilitated by GESDA is prototyping and validating this global curriculum to create a shared foundation to advance science diplomacy for the benefit of all. Each May, the Science Diplomacy Week convenes leaders from around the world for an immersive learning and networking experience into the ecosystem of academic and diplomatic institutions of international Geneva.
We are so excited to bring all of the coalition members that have been working very hard to bring us the content and the discussions that we're going to have this week.
The future global curriculum will be contextualized for different regions and career levels. For example, youth.
It's important to bring young people in these conversations because it's only then that we'll be able to ensure that future generations across the world fully enjoy the benefits of science and technology and leave no one behind.
Through a youth and anticipation initiative, the University of Cape Town and GESDA engage African youth with the topics of the Breakthrough Radar to bridge the understanding of how science may shape our future.
And then use these predicted futures to shape the present while ensuring that decisions and discussions include voices of African youth.
Science can also bring new insight into how we use diplomacy and how we understand multilateralism.
The SID Lab, Laboratory for Science and Diplomacy, is to capture and curate the data of multilateral interactions.
Through a solid base of expert partners in the field, the curriculum will aggregate, enhance, promote, and scale existing educational offers through global coordinated outreach, identify gaps, and develop new offers to address them. Together, we can use the future to build the present.
Mrs. Mamokgethi Phakeng, as Vice-Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, you are sensitive to the issue of training. Tell us about your experience this summer with African students who have used the radar as a learning tool.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I have to say that the GESDA Breakthrough Radar is a huge resource for teaching and learning. But if we don't make it accessible to young people and give them an opportunity to engage with it, then it loses its power as a resource. And so this year, we decided to engage young people. Of course, engaging them online. And we engaged them online with a focus of attracting African youth, but I'm sure because it was virtual, there were youth from everywhere else in the world. And we set up a challenge for them to start thinking about how they can use the science of the future to address the challenges of the now. If we do not engage or involve young people in these conversations, then we will fall into the trap that we have fallen into before, of excluding some voices, not voices only of the developing world, but also voices of young people. And so it's important that as we start this work, as we get on with this work, we've got voices of young people. But this is not just about young people get to know how science of the future, how science is growing and developing. It's also to say, this is where it's going. Can you look at your context? We share, so I hosted experts from Africa and elsewhere in the world to talk about the areas that we cover in GESDA, and then give young people an opportunity to say, what's troubling you about your current situation? And how do you think you can use the science of the future to attend to your current situation? That's almost giving them or reminding them of the power of taking agency, of doing something, rather than just looking at their challenges and just understanding more of their challenges, but actually taking the power in their hands and saying, we can see where the science is going. How can we use that science of the future to think about the present? We gave them a challenge, and the truth of the matter is that the young people of our continent are very interested, they are enthusiastic. More than 100 submissions were made, and we selected 3 of them, and they'll be here at this summit. But here's the thing, what we have seen with using the radar in this way is the power of the virtual platform, but also the the importance of involving other voices. And so this opens an opportunity to involve young people from all over the world, to even create a possibility of them engaging across countries in solving, in thinking about problems that are affecting the world and possible solutions using science of the future. And it also gives us an opportunity to it gives us a glimpse into the possibility of using the same approach, methodology, and approaches and platform to engage citizens broadly and not just stop with the young people. And so it's been an exciting time, and you know, we look forward to hearing the voices of the young people this week, because it will show what the future is. And here's the thing, they are going to inherit the future. And so it is important that they are involved in shaping how science should be used to shape the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mamokgethi Phakeng, for your statement. I have now the pleasure to present Patrick Aebischer, co-chairman of GESDA. And Patrick was appointed today, I think, as new chair of the Foundation's Impact Forum. And perhaps, Patrick Aebischer, can you tell us the goal you follow with this forum? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, as you've seen, you know, when we thought about this project 3 to 4 years ago, which was really kind of a exotic project, saying, can we make first a radar of science? What's cooking in laboratories? What can we expect in 5, 10, and 25 years? And, you know, you can see now this is becoming a reality with scientists engaging and having this radar. It's great to hear what Mamokgethi is doing it with bringing the youth, you know, to say, because they're going to have to live with it so as to be sufficiently inclusive. And then, you know, we brought, based on that, the second part of it was to bring the policymakers, the diplomats, and to try to see, based on this anticipation, what do we do about it? And that's why we created this solution accelerator that came. There was a last year meeting, there was 8 ideas that came out to say maybe there's solution ideas that we need to work on. And this summit is very clear, because it's kind of a funnel that works and say, what should we concentrate on? But once you have a solution, you have to implement to some extent. And that's where the third part of the rocket, to some extent, comes. And now, unfortunately, each one is more expensive than the previous one. And that's why I was asked to take care of this one, potentially. It's, you know, you're going to have, and I think we've identified 2, as you've heard, the Open Quantum Institute. And I think it's a very, you know, illustrative case. You know, we know that quantum computing will revolutionize a lot of things for our species. To some extent, we were thinking it was, you know, maybe years, decades down the road. What the scientists tell us, it's coming probably faster than we thought. So it is really the time to think not about making an institute to do and to push the technology, but create this institute that will work on the use case, as it was said. So that's the idea. And where could you do best is probably in Geneva. We have all the international organization, we have the NGOs, we have, you know, a great academic institutions. I think that's, you know, it's part of the DNA of this town. So I think that's what we're going to first concentrate on, is this impact forum. Now, if you, again, take the example of the quantum computing, you know, we know that probably some of the very large states will have access to it. Some of the big corporations, we know, are working on it. So how can you make sure that the utilization of this powerful tool will benefit mankind to some extent? And that's what the reason behind the Open Quantum Institute. So for this, we will have, of course, to fundraise, to be sure that, you know, and that's going to be probably people that are really interested, that are passionate, and making sure that the utilization of these new capabilities will be the right one. And I think that's really, you know, the philosophy behind the Impact Forum and Impact Fund. So, and you've heard that there's this global curriculum in science and diplomacy, to be sure that this communication, comes across those two different entities. But as you know, we're working now, you've seen on a couple of sessions, one called Neurotech Compass. It means that we're not ready to say what. So this is the kind of organization where we need to think about what is happening now on this brain-machine interface, which is another, I think, potential breakthroughs. So let's work about it. And maybe there'll be an instrument that needs an implementation. We don't know yet. But the Impact Forum will be there to say, if there is, we will try to coordinate and get also, I would say, the secure financial support from the public, but also from the private. And I think you need innovation. You need the great companies, but we tend to forget that part of the innovation comes from startups also. So you want to be sure that this implementation is done the proper way. And that will be really the mission of the Impact Forum. So is to implement this solution accelerator by fostering, I think, this entrepreneurial innovation. And I think also, last but not least, to increase the global audience of Geneva and Switzerland in this, mission, because I think that's one, in this troubling world, one place hopefully where we can still anticipate and prepare the good utilization of emerging technologies. So that's why now, we wouldn't have done it 3 years ago, but we feel that now we are sufficiently mature to start to think about having an impact forum and an impact fund. So it doesn't, we go to some extent from a think tank to a do tank. We will continue the think tank, but we are now envisioning the do tank.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is also the moment perhaps to underline a little bit the strategy we have for the financing. You have heard now about the Impact Forum, which is taking care of the financing of the impact initiatives. But I think it's also important for you to understand that when we are talking about the GESDA core budget, we want to have the biggest transparency on the one hand side, but also independence on the other side, because I think this is absolutely critical for the success. We wouldn't be able to have thousands of scientists from all over the world to work free of charge. They are not being paid in order to help us to achieve, to make a radar like we have it here. If we had not clear independence and no pressure for nowhere. That's a reason why for the core funding, we have only accepted money coming from the Swiss government, first of all, because they are our founders, and secondly, Switzerland being very neutral, and the influence of politics into the GESDA is very limited. But we have not accepted for the core funding any money from other governments, because we have seen many multilateral organizations that then afterwards are coming under political pressure just through the funding, and this we want to avoid. And the second one is also that for the core funding, we do not accept money from corporations, so that we keep absolutely and completely independence and no pressure coming from the financing side on the way how we are running GESDA. On the impact funding, as Patrick was touching us, this is completely different. This is where we need to have the support from governments. That's where we need to have the support also from corporations. And there, the financing strategy is completely different. But the core funding, we will keep our independence by using only money coming either from the Swiss institutions or from private foundations. Perhaps with this I introduce Michael Møller. As you know, he was the one who was setting up the GESDA Diplomacy Forum and whose members are actively participating in the formation and shaping of the solutions. And I would like to talk to you, Michael, perhaps a little bit about the geopolitical lens of the radar.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. Before I go into what Peter just mentioned, I thought that this was a good opportunity, the fact that we have finished our startup phase, our second summit, to thank all the Diplomacy Forum members and moderators that have worked with us over the past 3 years for their support and engagement, which has been completely crucial in our ability to progress. And that progress, as was mentioned also earlier, and the outlines of solutions that we are proposing are described in more detail in the Science Breakthrough Radar and will be worked on in depth over the next 3 days. Right now, I have the pleasure to highlight a new collaborative effort between GESDA, the Geneva Center for Security Policy, and Columbia University, and to introduce our new partners, former Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Jean-Marie Guéhenno, who is now Kent Visiting Professor of Conflict Resolution at Columbia, and Ambassador Thomas Greminger, the Director of the GCSP, who is not here today but is being represented by Mr. Tobias Wessner, who is Head of Research and Policy Advice and Head of Security and Law at the GCSP. So together we will be pooling our respective areas of expertise and working to create a forum on the future of peace and war, which is intended in an anticipatory way, using the anticipation processes that GESDA has developed, to foster common understanding and unity of purpose, enhance foresight and preparedness amongst a broad range of international actors in the peace and diplomacy field. The initiative will focus on a broad set of themes: geopolitical and related trends, environmental and climate trends, social trends, with an emphasis on inequality, and obviously new technology trends, in order to gain a more comprehensive understanding of the interconnections and the layering of what seems at times to be separate peace and conflict vectors. You will also find more in-depth descriptions of those in the geopolitical lens part of the radar. I now have the pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Guéhenno for a brief comment, and Tobias will come afterwards. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the floor. I'm excited and honored to be part of this press conference. We have heard how marvelous the progress of science is and is accelerating. And at the same time, we live in a world of accelerating political dysfunctionality. And so this old expression, thinking out of the box, in a way acquires a new urgency. And I think this new collaboration that we are embarking on will precisely address that, connecting areas which are not systematically connected and which need to talk to each other. Diplomats need to get out of the diplomatic box. And scientists need to hear the concerns of the diplomats. The project that we are shaping together with the Geneva Center for Security Policy and GESDA will try precisely to do that. And I think it has a lot of potential. And we're going to work hard on it. And I'm happy to come from New York to Geneva today to help launch that project. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, also from my side, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you very much for having GCSP here. And also thank you very much for the future collaboration that we're starting and announcing here right at this day. From the perspective of the Geneva Center for Security Policy, we're very excited to engage in this adventure. We have been working on the geopolitical trends for the last couple of years, also the future of warfare and peace in general, notably through the lens of specific applications or military domains, notably cyber operations or cyberspace, outer space, and of course, artificial intelligence. But there's a big but, and this is really crucial in light of this future collaboration. The big but is we're obviously forced to work with open source information, looking at what's happening in battlefields, talking with partners from militaries, from policymakers, and obviously looking a lot at policies that have been adopted or being developed, such as by NATO on artificial intelligence and their ethical use, etc. That, however, has significant limitations because we're really actually always running behind. We're always trying to catch up to actually know what's going on and know what the implications are. And this is where really this partnership comes in, and this is really, I think, really cutting edge in a sense to really take the approach, this anticipatory approach from GESDA, apply it to this domain, to these geopolitical and security questions, and do it in a systematic and scientific manner. And in that sense, I think that will really open up new doors, new insights, and really also, obviously at this stage, force us to have the courage to look into 25 years. Who expected that we would be again in war in the middle of Europe? Who expected what the consequences on other continents were? I think this is really amazing, and thank you very much for this engagement.
Thank you to both of you for your comments. So just to close, this collaboration will now intensify, and we are preparing 2 workshops in the course of 2023. One in Geneva, the first one, and another one in New York, that will look at how we will work together on the geopolitical lens in the breakthrough radar for 2023, and also effective preparations for the Forum on Peace and War that will be held in conjunction with our next summit in a very dedicated session, and then the one after that will be in New York. So a lot of work ahead of us, and as Tobias just said, I think we are cresting a wave, in a sense, with this initiative, and hopefully we'll come up with something really useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Møller. Before turning to your questions, Mr. Peter Brabeck-Letmathe will close this part of the press conference and address some words, conclusion words.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would join the thanks to both of you, Ambassador Thomas Greminger and former Under-Secretary General of the UN, Jean-Marie Guénaud, for the partnership. We are really looking forward. I think this is a major step in an area which is quite virgin, I would say. I mean, we had a long discussion at the board again about science, diplomacy, science, and the value, and especially when you see a war, how much diplomacy can really do and things like this. So it's an extremely important subject, and thanks for this collaboration. Perhaps before I close and open the question and answer session, 2 words about the governance of GESDA. As we have been leaving now the startup phase and we are moving into the scale-up phase, we have received first from the Swiss federal government the agreement that GESDA should develop itself for the next 10 years with a financial commitment coming from the Confederation, which is 3 times the one we had for the startup phase, which I think is a clear sign that the first 3 years of the startup were successful and gave sufficient confidence to the political world in Bern that GESDA can and should develop into a major important institution here in Geneva. The same thing was also done by the canton and by the city of Geneva. So our 3 founders have engaged for a new period of up to 10 years. That also had an impact, of course, on our board and our status and that we have. On the board side, we had Matthias Eger, who asked us to be relieved from his duty at the board because he has so many other things. And Matthias Eger was an appointment by the Swiss government, and the Swiss government nominated Michael Hengartner, whom you have heard before, as a new member of the board. Then the canton of Geneva reconfirmed Micheline Calmiret for another period of 3 years to the board, which we were extremely happy. And then we made another decision that we wanted that in the future the board gets even more actively involved in the activities of GESDA, and we decided that each forum that GESDA creates should be presided by one member of the board. So we have the Impact Forum, you have already seen, it's by Patrick. We have the forum, the Diplomatic Forum, and as we want also that the chairman of the Diplomatic Forum becomes a member of the board has agreed to have Michael Møller as a new member of the board, and at the same time, of course, continues as the chairman of the Diplomatic Forum. And then we decided that Michael Hengartner should from now on, as a member of the board, be responsible for the Scientific Forum. So we have to thank publicly enormously our two co-chairs of the Scientific Forum in the startup phase, which was Joël Messot and Martin Vetterli, who really allowed to have this wonderful product, the first product that we produced, which is a scientific breakthrough radar. It was under their guidance that those thousands of scientists have been working, and we are very grateful for their engagement. As I mentioned, in the future is Michael Hengartner, who is going to be the chairman of this forum. And the last appointment to the board is that of Stéphane Decoter, who will serve as Secretary General of the board, and he will be our Chief Strategy Officer of the foundation. And with this, we also have decided to appoint a CEO for the foundation, and this is Sandro Giuliani, whom I think most of you already know because he has been with us from the very beginning. So those are the news on the governance side, and I thank everybody for being here today on this press conference. We have, as I mentioned before, we have most of the members of the board who has been sitting into the press conference. And when I open up the question and answer session, I open up the question and answer session for any member that is both sitting here or is in the audience that is here. So you don't have to limit the question just to us here. Also, I would say our two special guests, if you have special questions, of course, we are all ready to answer any question that you might have. With this, let's open up. Please. You get the microphone.
Thank you, Laurent Siro, Swiss News Agency, Keystone ATS. A bunch of quick, I hope, questions. The first one, with the environment that you mentioned, the war in Ukraine, the food crisis, then that renewal of confidence by the Swiss government, and also quantum was awarded part of Nobel Award last weekend. So would you say that this second summit marks the real start for GESDA? That's the first question. Then there will be a political panel on Friday. So you talked a lot about science and diplomacy. What about the appetite of other foreign governments? Is there trust and distrust or distrust towards GESDA? And then lastly, when you look at what at stake for the Ukrainian war now, and you launched today that forum, could GESDA as an honest broker also in the future play a role to gather, for instance, scientists from Ukraine and Russia in order to find solutions, whereas track one and the political leaders cannot find solutions? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Let me start with the most difficult one, which is the last one. Now, I could give you my personal opinion, which I don't think that's what you want. So I will give you more the official one. I don't think that science and GESDA can be helpful in the bridging of a conflict like the war we have in Ukraine. And this can only happen if there's a political will to use science, and I haven't seen this political will, I have seen just the contrary. I think it is a big, big mistake by politicians to use science, art, and even economy as a political weapon, because you're destroying bridges that afterwards it will take a long, long time to build them back. So as long as there's no political will, a GESDA cannot be very helpful in this conflict. The second question was more about the political change and the integration of the political actors in the summit. I think when we started GESDA, it became very clear from the beginning that GESDA is and should not be a political decision maker. This is not and cannot be. We wouldn't have the legitimacy to become a political decision maker. And that's a reason why we have to be as honest, transparent, and apolitical as possible. But this doesn't mean that when we talk about solutions, that we don't need then afterwards, for the realization of the solutions, the political decision makers. We will not be able to make any solution if we don't have the backing from political decision makers. Okay? So if the President of the Confederation invites this year for the first time political actors, ministers, it is because he wants to present to those political decision makers what GESDA is doing, and to see whether the political decision makers have an interest, or they feel we are on the right thing or we are not on the right thing, or whether they will be in the future a supporter for solutions that we might be bringing forward. So that it's always the same thing. The political decision making is not at GESDA. It is with the political environment. Okay? And the first question, if I remember right, was whether the second summit is the first summit. I think I'm very proud about the first summit. But it is clear that the first summit was a proof to our founders that we were able in 2 years of work to bring forward such a summit and such a radar. That was the base for their willingness to prolong the life of GESDA. So it was like, when you're an apprentice, it's your masterpiece before you become a master. Now the second summit is the first summit of the long-term GESDA.
Stéphane Bissard, Le Temps newspaper. I have two questions. The first one is about the Open Quantum Institute. If you could give more details about how it's going to work, with whom it's going to work, who will be the scientists working with it, with what institution will you work, what are your short-term, middle-term goals, and things like that. That's my first question. The second question is, how do you measure actually the appeal that GESDA has on the international scientific scene? Thank you.
I think the first one I leave to Fabiola.
So thank you for the very good question. So first of all, I would like to mention that the initiative of the Open Quantum Institutes already raised huge interest. Can you hear me well? Yeah. And so GESDA has been able to raise the interest and potential partnership of more than 30 institutions, academic, diplomatic, and industry. So there is already a lot of interest. Then, as usual, we are going to do things by steps, as mentioned maybe in the video or from someone else, that there has been a task force in place which has developed the model, which has tried to look at what this institute can do. And now the idea is to launch an incubator, a prototype, a kind of prototype. Okay, so particular physicists like to proceed by prototypes. First you try, and then you see, and then you go on by step. And so the prototypes actually will also have the goal and the objectives of refining the goals of the institute, but also looking at the funding mechanism, looking at the governance mechanism, and then on a time scale, we hope around 2025, we hope to be able to launch the institute itself. So many of your questions actually will find answers about the specific goals in the future years. I think the overarching goal is not only, as I mentioned before, to provide a platform, an infrastructure, a platform for the share of the quantum technologies to everyone, but also to try to be very pragmatic and see how these quantum technologies can be put at the service not only of private and national or industry interests, but also on tackling with the big challenges. So the idea is to put in place some use cases related to the SDGs, for instance, which will be our first projects to tackle. There is also a GESDA X Prize, which is our main partner, actual quantum competition, that will also, solicit this kind of proposals. So it's coming, and it will be. The next years are going to be extremely interesting and exciting.
Yeah, I could say also two words about the excitement, at least on the science. Every big institution that relates to high-performance computing and so on has asked to be part of it, so I would say that's a very good sign. So we have some of the best places. Also interesting from a country standpoint, by discussing with the various permanent organizations here of countries, there have been now more than 12 or 14 countries that have spontaneously expressed interest. So I think showing, especially for the countries that don't have necessarily an access to this, so I think this is also a very interesting sign. Also from the private corporation, as you know, the Microsofts are working on, and they have prototypes of quantum computers, and they've very strongly expressed their interest to participate. But you may have heard in the video, somebody like Matthias Treuer that you've just seen. Just as a memory, he was a professor at ETH Zurich. He's one of the world, specialists in quantum computing. He has joined Microsoft, but now he's a perfect link between. So, and when you look at it, some of the top scientists working on quantum computing have now decided to participate. Again, but I want to make sure that we're not there to develop the super quantum computing. We're there to try to learn how to use it, for the use case, for the good of mankind. And I think that's really part of the DNA of what we are. We have anticipated that quantum is coming. In fact, and it was also exemplified by the award of the Nobel Prize to the quantum field this year. That means you can feel it's becoming ripe from a technical standpoint. It's going to become a reality, and now it's the time to think about how we're going to use this instrument. So that's really but just to come back, yes, there was a fantastic excitement from the science, from the countries, and from the corporation to try to work together so that we, to some extent, are better prepared than we were when we started the web.
Mm-hmm. And second question about how you measure the appeal that GESDA has in the international scientific.
But comme I said, they're coming and they're asking to be part of it. So for me, that's already, in science, it's not usually the case. People are more skeptical than anything else. And the fact that, by themselves, they've kind of proposed, I think it measures, at least there is a great interest. Now, time will say, I think until 25 and so on. And also, we will also have to find the funding. So for me, the kind of also, that's going to be the proof of the pudding is how much are we going to be able to raise to do, for this to become a reality. So that's going to be also, a way to measure.
But I think the question which you were asking is responded by the amount of scientists who are working free of charge into this project. I mean, you have more than 4,000 scientists, more than 4,000 scientists, which are willing to discuss, which are coming forward. And you saw this year we have 50% more scientists who are signing up this book, who are signing up this thing. I mean, they only come because they are convinced that what we have been producing is a unique instrument which has not been existing before, and it has a value by itself. It has a value for them. That's why they are doing it. So for me, the sign whether whether we can keep up the interest of the scientists will be how many of them are continuing to work with us, and whether this reflects also geographically the world, and not only coming from one part of the world. And if you look at the radar, you will see that we have really spread all over the world, and we have a participation from all over the world, which is basically the response to what you are asking for.
Philippe Møller, the Geneva Observer. I'm going to press you on the OQI and on multilateralism. Mr. Aebischer, you said that the DNA of Geneva is indeed international cooperation, rules-based multilateralism, multi-stakeholders model, which are exactly the models that China, for instance, is actively dismantling in a various number of organizations in town. Now, we live in a technopolar world. Science and tech are at the very heart of the great powers rivalry. How do you expect China and the US, for instance, to share the values and wishes, indeed, of GESDA to work for the better of mankind when there is fierce rivalry into those countries? And I do not doubt the interest in the scientific community, but it is slightly different than the national interest that we see today being played out on the scene. Thank you.
This is the crucial question. and I think that two answers to that. The first is how science works, and I think, science works by sharing. I think by peer recognition, so as to move the process. So I think the fact that we see some of the top scientists from all of those, even including those countries, ready to participate, is an important thing. I think what has been missing really in all this multilateralism is we don't have scientists at the table. And I think the summit make it very simple and clear. This is the first time that we invite science at the table of multilateralism. I'm not saying that scientists are better people than others, but the fact that they are, it will bring another, I would say, way to think about it. Now, of course, we will have to integrate this and see how countries and so on will, but also private institutions, how much ready they are. But again, if you push the technology, let's think a little bit further. There's instruments that are very clear and essential. For example, patent IP. Are you ready to let this field go through IP or not? But those are very concrete things. This is the city where this can be made, because you will influence or not the commercial utilization of a technology. So WIPO is very central to that. And of course, a lot of those countries still, obey by some of those rules. So again, it's bringing the scientists to the table, and which is, I think, a very novel, and also trying to re-question some of the way, we are dealing with some of the key scientific question in the way of the utilization. And yes, it can be discourse, but it can have very practical, and the example of IP is one of them.
Sure.
Yeah. So maybe to complement what Patrick just said, we have to do an example of where these things work, and this is CERN. We have U.S. participation, we have Chinese participation, but the rules of the games are clear, and are our rules of the game: open science, open education, etc. So I think, and of course, institutions like CERN or GESDA or the Open Quantum Institute cannot solve directly geopolitical conflicts, as Peter mentioned, but they can show the way. They can show a different way for humanity to work together. And I think we need more of these examples.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I don't know about you guys, but this is amazing. So congratulations for what you have achieved, and I'm looking forward to the future. My name is Mariana Bozizan. I'm an impact investor, serial entrepreneur, and as a Club of Rome member, I have a question for you, Ms. Gianotti. You have rightly said that technology needs to become sustainable in order to implement the UN SDGs within planetary boundaries. Can you say something to that? That would be of great interest to me.
Yeah, so as I was mentioning, today we have a two-speed world. We have a monde à deux vitesses, those that are clearly running and faster, developing technology, and those that are kept behind. And every time there is a crisis, call it COVID, call it war, call it something else, this gap diverges, increases. And so we have to be very, very careful that the technological development, which is of course very good and should be development at the service of humanity, not just per se, does not increase this gap. So for me, as I said, the main thing is to make sure that the new technologies are developed in a more sustainable way in terms of sharing. And this means being able to share them for free of charge, with people that do not have the possibility otherwise to access them. Education, open education and training, free of charge for everyone, is absolutely essential. So we need to bring more and more scientists, more and more people from the developing countries, and I hope that this will, this is something that GESDA is already trying to do, but I hope that will be done more and more, in particular with this Open Quantum Institute. That is very important. It looks like a little drop in a big ocean, but the ocean is made of many drops. So if we work all together, at the end we will manage to get a little bit and try to fill this gap. So we see in our field at CERN, this works. We managed to involve more and more scientists from developing countries, but you have to invest also, to invest resources for having students or summer students or from these countries. So it requires effort. It's not just not come like this. It requires effort, but I think we have to commit to this.
Valérie Wacker, SRF. I wondered if you are in any form of contact with the big ones of the tech industry, naming it Google, Apple, Microsoft, or Meta, and what form this contact takes.
You want to say?
Yeah, I just said it. For the quantum computing, we are, for example, one of the person who will be here today is Matthias Treuer, who said it was before an ETH professor, who is now leading the development of quantum computing at Microsoft. So yes, we are. I think it is essential, Technology now is not only in universities and so on, it's also in big corporations, certainly in the AI and quantum. So we need to work together on it.
Boris Engelson, journaliste indépendant, j'aurais une question pour chacun de vous, mais comme je suis poltron, je n'oserais pas m'en prendre à des monts sacrés comme le CERN ou comme l'ONU, même si M. Møller n'est plus en fonction. Alors je me vengerai sur les 3 pauvres sans défense. The best and the brightest. Nous avons de nouveau entendu cette formule tout à l'heure, et c'est un peu le trademark du GESDA. Mais vous savez mieux que moi qu'un journaliste américain jadis a écrit un livre, The Best and the Brightest, qui disait que the best étaient certainement les meilleurs et the brightest les plus compétents, mais que les mettre ensemble derrière un label aboutissait toujours à des absurdités. Alors, qu'est-ce qui vous autorise, M. Aebischer, puisque vous êtes le premier, ma question s'adresse à vous, à dire que this time is probably the right time? Je ne crois pas que les échecs de la futurologie, on a beaucoup ironisé sur Hermann Kahn, soient anecdotiques. Ils ont peut-être quelque chose à voir avec la définition profonde de l'avenir et des changements de paradigme. Ma question à M. Brabeck...
Peut-être laissons répondre.
Oui, d'accord, mais je tiens aux 2 autres.
Voilà. Non, c'est toi, moi je ne l'ai pas.
Chacun aura son tour.
Je crois que ce qui est important, si on veut demander essayer d'anticiper les choses, et plus on va être loin du temps actuel, moins l'anticipation sera probablement précise. Mais je me suis toujours dit que peut-être que les personnes qui étaient les mieux à même de savoir ce qui allait se passer à 5, 10 ou 25 ans dans leur domaine respectif, c'était les gens qui travaillaient de façon professionnelle, compétente, et reconnue par leur pairs. Et c'est simplement ce qu'on a essayé de faire. Donc c'est simplement de demander aux gens qui travaillaient à la pointe de leur domaine de savoir, je dis toujours comme scientifique, quand on nous demande d'écrire des grand proposals, c'est toujours à 2, 3, 4, maximum 5 ans. Donc je veux dire, c'est ce qu'on nous demande. C'est le job du scientifique, c'est d'essayer de proposer un plan pour une hypothèse qu'il aimerait regarder. Alors plus on s'éloigne du temps, plus on devient futurologue. Et c'est toujours le problématique où on demande, et on doit presque forcer ces gens de lui dire où sera le quantum dans 25 ans. On n'en sait rien d'une certaine manière, mais en même temps, si on n'essaye pas d'anticiper, on ne répond pas à cette question. Et ça a été dans la science, et on l'a vécu même à l'EPFL avec le Human Brain et autres. C'est-à-dire quand on vous demande de penser très loin, plus vous êtes loin, moins vous êtes sûr d'être vrai. Mais je pense qu'on se doit de faire ce travail d'anticipation si on veut justement pouvoir avoir ce dialogue en disant voilà où la science pourrait aller. Et les meilleures personnes qui peuvent essayer de nous dire, c'est les gens qui travaillent sur le domaine même.
Second question.
Oui, mes deux autres questions sont beaucoup plus brèves. L'une s'adresse à M. Brabeck-Letmathe, qui est bien placé pour connaître les grandeurs, mais aussi parfois les bassesses de la société civile, dont on utilise pourtant beaucoup la rhétorique ici ce matin. Vous avez parlé de la science pour décarboner, c'est un des 3 ou 4 objectifs majeurs. La société civile ne veut pas entendre parler de géo-engineering. J'étais encore récemment à des réunions. Ils ont ça en horreur parce que ça les prive de leur cheval de bataille. Alors peut-on, ou disons, y a-t-il espoir que le GESDA soit justement l'endroit où ces deux langages, disons ce dialogue de sourds, finissent par devenir un dialogue d'entendants? And my question to Ms. Phakeng, I just got a mail from an influential magazine blog. Adults today care too much what young people think. And this is broadly what Bernard-Henri Lévy, a controversial journalist and activist, said in Geneva 2 or 3 years back. Have you read this article, and how do you react to the title?
Yeah, I think we adults do care about what young people think, because the world has changed. I mean, people talk about Generation Z, and I talk about Generation C. And that Generation C, of course, is influenced by young people, but it's also influenced, it grows faster, it's interested in different things. And so if we don't, and they've got different values, if we don't care about what young people say, think, and want, we actually might end up, the excellence that we're doing might end up being challenged, destroyed, rubbished, because young people are not part of it. You want anything to be successful in this world, you've got to get young people on board. And you've got to hear what they're saying, because the world is changing in that way. And when you say young, and the reason I say C is because the C is led by young people, but there are adults as well. They live online, they sleep with their computers, they live in the world of mashups and TikTok and all sorts of things. So that's why it's important to listen.
Success and science are two distinct things.
Success
And science are two distinct things.
Yeah.
That's another discussion.
Yes, and they're not mutually exclusive.
Voilà, la question, on peut la simplifier. Il y a des gens qui veulent croire, il y a des gens qui veulent savoir. NGOs veut croire, GESDA veut savoir. Voilà la différence.
Une question ici, madame.
Hello, thank you very much for the very interesting panel. I am Sarah Sornada, I am a journalist for AD News, and my question is a bit of a follow-up question about the Quantum Institute, because today, with the geopolitical context with the European Union, you know, there is this situation where the European Commission said that Switzerland cannot take part to Horizon Europe, and Swiss researchers cannot take part to European research projects related to quantum. So my question is, do you feel that the Quantum Institute will bridge part of that gap and allow all the key players to work on these matters together? Thank you very much.
Who wants? Both. Okay. Vas-y. Fabiola first.
I think the Open Quantum Institute is something that is above all these things. Okay, so it's something that is really has the vocation is really to try to be an institute that encompasses difficulties, or and who knows, maybe it could be a tool that will help then get Switzerland and the European Commission for what concern Horizon Europe or whatever closer together. But in principle, it's something that is above all these things and should be really a platform where people can access the technologies regardless of of their background or their political situation of their countries, their pay salary, etc. So I hope that really the Open Quantum Institute will manage to accomplish these goals of overcoming the political or other difficulties, and if the institute can do so, I think it can be also instrumental in some cases to improve some relations, and who knows. So I think that this will be our main goal.
Yeah, I second this, and I think we're talking about the utilization. We're not talking about having access to major funding to push the research. So, and despite of the difficult relation that Switzerland has, but not only now the UK with the EU in terms of research, I think it doesn't prevent us, we have our own funding system, to continue to do quantum research. But I think whenever it comes to discussing about the utilization, I think not only Europe versus Switzerland, this is a micro problem. We're talking about, a global problem about the utilization. And that's where also we will try in the Impact Forum and Impact Fund to go beyond those and not rely on, I would say, classical funding mechanism, but go more into major philanthropy and those kind of people that will go beyond political little issues that we may have between Europe and Switzerland.